History Inside a Nutshell, the show where we sail into our port of call discussing maritime history. In today's video, we are looking into the story of a Japanese battleship whose sinking caused the downfall of the Imperial Japanese Navy and Japan herself. She was the last hope for her country, but history had other ideas.
Yamato, the final defeat of the Japanese Navy. On the 7th of April 1945, airplanes from the United States Navy sunk the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy on a suicide mission during the Battle of Okinawa. Nicknamed the last hope of Japan, it took 11 torpedoes and 6 bombs to sink her. But how did the Battle of Okinawa and the sinking of this great ship play an important role? Before answering this question, we need to trace back the history of the Second World War and Japan's history with America. In the early 20th century, Japan had ambitions to grow her economy and military, as well as to expand and become an independent empire. However, the country lacked the natural resources she needed to power her expansion. The three main resources she needed were coal, iron, and oil. But rather than negotiating with her neighbors, Japan fought and conquered countries in Asia and China. Even before the beginning of World War II, the world began to be concerned about Japan's actions and watched her every move. Following 1937, after Japan had invaded China, the United States decided to pass economic sanctions against Japan. This meant that America would refuse to provide the resources Japan needed for its empire, specifically an embargo against the vital oil needed to power her war force. America also froze Japan's financial assets, meaning that Japan could not buy supplies from America. As a result, Japan's leaders calculated that they would have just 2 years until all her oil would dry up. In response, Prime Minister Hideki Tojo moved Japan to a more aggressive war plan, invading all of Southeast Asia, securing the vast oil fields there. Unfortunately for Japan, the sleeping giant of America controlled the archipelago of the Philippines, sitting in the middle of Southeast Asia. Japan's imperial leaders knew they could not win a long war against the United States, as she could not keep up with the industrial power of American factories and shipyards. So, Japan planned a surprise attack against the U.S. Pacific Fleet, located in Pearl Harbor and Honolulu, Hawaii, in order to cripple her navy. This would prevent America from quickly striking back, and thereby giving Japan time to secure her position and hopefully sign a peace treaty. On December 7, 1941, warplanes from the Imperial Japanese Navy launched their attack, resulting in over 3,500 casualties. The next day, America declared war on Japan, sparking a 4-year war. However, tensions between Japan and America had been brewing for years before Pearl Harbor. 7 years earlier, Japan began to isolate herself from the rest of the world, including withdrawing from the Washington Naval Agreement, which had restricted the size of her naval fleet, clearing the path for the construction of Yamato. Yamato was designed to be able to confront and sink any battleship or even an entire fleet of battleships that she may encounter, especially those of the United States and British Royal Navy. Just 1 week after war was declared, Yamato entered service. During her time at sea, Yamato, alongside with her sister ship Musashi, took part in several battles, fighting against U.S. naval fleets and forces. However, Yamato's contribution in these battles was insignificant. Following the loss of Iwo Jima, the Imperial Japanese Navy was running out of luck. Allied forces had begun to invade the last obstacle to the Japanese home islands, the island of Okinawa. Desperate, the Imperial Japanese Navy devised a mission to destroy the U.S. forces and reclaim the island. They would do this by beaching Yamato along the shore, preventing her from sinking, and then bombard the American landing grounds with her 18.1-inch guns, the largest naval guns ever used, obliterating everything in her path before running out of ammo. This mission was known as Operation Tenjin-Go. Luckily for the Americans, they had been able to decrypt Japanese codes and messages to determine the whereabouts and the actions of the Imperial Japanese Navy. It was here that the United States Navy tracked down their enemy near Okinawa. On April 7, 1945, while Yamato's 300 miles away from Okinawa, U.S. submarines and aircraft had caught her by surprise. The battle went on for 2.5 hours, and in the first stages of the event, there were hopes from Japan that the Imperial Japanese Navy could fight off the Americans and win the day. However, these hopes were dashed when, after being attacked by 3 waves of American planes, Yamato suffered hits by 11 torpedoes and 6 bombs from the aircraft of the U.S. fleet. The largest battleship in the world rapidly flooded and soon capsized before exploding into 2 pieces. Out of the 3,332 crew members on board, only 276 had survived. Nearly 6 months later, the U.S. used atomic bombs on the 2 cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and with the Soviet Union's declaration of war against Japan, the Japanese had no choice but to surrender, marking the end of the Second World War.
The day of days for America and her allies. Crowds before the White House await the announcement from the President that the Japs have surrendered unconditionally.
I have received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government in reply to the message forwarded to that government by the Secretary of State on August 11th. I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan. In the reply, there is no qualification.
The sinking of the Yamato marked an end of an era for Japan, and it was argued that it had become a turning point in world history. No longer were battleships the pride and glory of her nation. Rather, that reward was passed on to the aircraft carrier. While Yamato was the world's largest and most powerful battleship of all time, she is remembered for the wrong reasons. Despite having a fascinating story in the Pacific theater, she should be recognized as a symbol of the old world's violent desires and tendencies of military glory, leading instead to the utter destruction and devastation for all those who get caught in her wake.
I would like to thank TreeBark Productions for narrating this week's video. TreeBark Productions is a Kobe-focused stop-motion channel, uploading short videos on building aircraft and ships and reenacting historical events like the sinking of the Yamato and the collision of the RMS Olympic and the HMS Hawk. If you like stop-motion videos and if you are passionate about history, subscribe to TreeBark Productions for future videos. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please subscribe for more historical content. Until next time, this has been History Inside a Nutshell, departing from the docks. Thank you so much for all of your support and enjoy the rest of your voyage.